I think it's time we blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
On today's episode of Women Interactions, directed Dr. Stone, episode 17, 100 Nights and 1,000 Skies. I don't know how it did it, but what this episode pulled off was making me feel about characters introduced just in the last episode. I was honestly surprised how sad I got when we learned more about the survivors of the petrification. And honestly, it's so much sadder than I would have imagined. Now, last we left off, Ruri began recounting the final of the 100 tales, one about a boy named Senku. We learn about his father, Byakuya, who just so happened to be in space with 5 others when P-Day happened. And the last episode left off with what looks like Byakuya taking charge. Now, starting out today's episode, Byakuya wanted to go to Earth. We need to go back there, we need to find out what the hell's going on. But Schemmel is there to stop him with a punch to the gut, stating, you have a son, you have something to live for. Let someone who doesn't even have family go down there first. So Schemmel, along with Connie and Lillian, use a re-entry capsule and begin their journey back down to Earth. Unfortunately, their landing was off the mark. They seem to be trapped in the ocean, upside down, making escape virtually impossible. This situation is absolutely terrifying. You are trapped with a limited supply of oxygen, and your only way out will literally mean you drowning. So all that's left is conserving as much oxygen you can, but in the end, you're basically just counting down to your death. But it seems Byakuya and the other two were just not idly standing by. No, as this sun is about to set on the horizon, Lillian begins to sing. But this is a joyous tune, because who does she see? Yes, Byakuya in a rowboat is there to rescue them. The remaining 3 on the space station decided to go down there themselves. It seems they were actually more on target, and it just so happens that there was a rowboat on the island that they, landed on. Now, eventually they make it back to this deserted island, or at least seemingly deserted. There was a rowboat, so that it shows signs of life. Unfortunately, the man who resembles Tom Hanks from Castaway, just like dreadlocked, dirty, shoveled, he too is petrified, so it seems that this event was all-encompassing. Most likely the entire world was petrified. Now, as we move forward in time, some events had occurred. Schemmel and Connie actually get hitched. And this is where we get another unbelievably sad moment that seems to just come out of nowhere. During the ceremony, Lillian began to sing, obviously as a gesture, but we get a flashback into her childhood life where it seems she was either poor or beaten, and the only solace she had was in music. And upon remembering this, she runs off crying, and Byakuya there is there to console her, and this is the first instance we get of any kind of relationship between those two. She's upset that all the music, and in turn pretty much all the knowledge of the world will someday will just be forgotten. Byakuya is like, no, I believe that humanity will move on, everything will, progress back to where it was. Eventually this stuff will be saved, trying to console the sorrowful diva. Not only that, but it seems Yakov and Daria popped out a couple kids. But just because they're on a deserted island doesn't mean they're separated for the world entirely. No, a ghastly look into Ruri's future is made vehemently clear when Connie becomes ill with pneumonia. At this time, Yakov and Daria take the rowboat and try to head to the mainland in search for antibiotics, but in the next scene we see that Connie unfortunately did not make it. Lillian seems to be the one taking care of Yakov and Daria's children, and Schemmel is just disheveled. It seems he's having a tough time coping with the fact that Connie is gone, but more than that, it seems he too has pneumonia and as soon is in the same bedridden position that we saw Connie. At this point, the two that set off are still haven't returned, so there's no antibiotics, and after a little interaction between Lillian and Byakuya, where he states that no matter how it looks like, my life was fun, and in the end, it was a good one, and then he too dies. Moving further even more, we see that not only are there the 2 children left over from Yakov and Daria, we see more kids, presumably Byakuya and Lillian. At this point, I don't think Connie and Schemmel had any kids. I could be wrong though, but this is where Byakuya gets the idea to make the 100 Tales. Stories that would pass along knowledge that the descendants of the survivors will not otherwise have. One's about giant beasts, where to get food, how to be safe, and eventually a tale about minerals, because Byakuya, being able to see in the future somehow, is able to tell that one day someone will need to collect these rocks, these specimens, and somehow they will be a guiding force in the future of, humanity. And this is where we get a giant revelation. One of my biggest concerns from last episode was the fact that Senku would be related in some way to the descendants of the survivors, but in fact, Byakuya seems to be the adopted father of Senku. They are not blood related, but nonetheless, he has the utmost faith that Senku will one day serve survive one day, come back from this petrification, solve it, and bring the 7 billion people back from humanity, from the brink of death or nothingness and the fact that they're statues, to the inevitable conclusion of eating ramen in space. That's what he was telling Schemmel before Schemmel passed. Now, more time moves on, and eventually it looks like Lillian has passed on, and it's just Byakuya, with the remainder of the kids, the descendants of the survivors, all of them still very young, and then eventually he passes. Now, before we move on with the exciting ending of this episode, I have to state my issues with this. First and foremost, we're on a deserted island with no other mainland in sight, but if this is the spot for the future Ishigami Village looks like it's surrounded by a lake at top. This is the giant ocean in the middle of nowhere. So at one point, is there a continental shift to where it makes this land? But if so, how did Senku walk there on foot from where he at in Japan? But at one point, do people move from Ishigami Village or the deserted island to where Ishigami Village would eventually be? That is absolutely confusing. I'm not 100% sure what's going on there, because it looks like I said, we're on a deserted island, and then cut to the 3,700 years into the future, Senku can walk there by foot. So I don't know what's going on there. Another thing is, what the hell happened to Yakov and Daria? They go out and they just never come back. Does that did they ever make it to the mainland? Did they find the antibiotics? Did they die on their way there? If they didn't and they make it to the mainland, how come they never made it back? Was their boat destroyed? Did they decide to give up? They left 2 children there, so they can't just give up on them. Did they get there, find survivors, and get killed? I mean, there's just so many possibilities with them. It's just setting up one of those mysteries, and I hope we get a payoff. Just don't let that one slide by. Another thing is, seeing how Connie and Schemmel, I do not believe, had any children at this point. We only had 2 sets of descendants now. One's from Daria and Yakov, the 2 siblings we see Lillian hold at Connie's grave, and we have the ones from Byakuya and Lillian. Now, I figured all 3 couples would have children. It would help, dilute the gene pool, sort of speak, but it seems inbreeding would happen a lot quicker with only 2 sets of descendants from these 2 individuals. Now, I'm not saying incest, where brother and sister. I'm saying inbreeding, where they share genetic, similarities. I mean, at some point, 3rd, maybe even 2nd generation, we're going to see crossbreeding genetics. So I'm still having issues with that. But we cut to the future where Senku says, oh, don't worry, you and me aren't blood related because me and him aren't blood related. But even though we're 3,700 years apart generation-wise, it's been so diluted. Yeah, that's between him and them. But what about just generations after the survivors? Like, the genetic parts are still screwing me up on this, and I still have issues with that. But I'm not a scientist, so I'm gonna let that one slide for moving forward's sake, because we still have some things to talk to. Now, before Senku can join in on the celebration that everyone else seems to take a part of, Rory rocks him to the village grave, and upon that is Senku's father. We see that little stone marker. It's the exact same stone marker that we see next to Connie, Schemmel, and Lillian. Again, bringing us back to the issue of, is this Ishigami Village? If so, how did a deserted island somehow become walking distance from where Senku and Taiju and Yuzuriha in the tree were? I don't fucking know. What seems to be at one point a deserted island in the middle of the ocean has now become an island inside of a lake. Like, I don't know exactly what the hell's going on geography-wise. Again, maybe continental shift, but that only makes sense because if they relocated, why would they bring one of the grave markers unless it was seen as something as, holy, and they decided to take that relic with them? I don't know. Moving forward, she tells Senku the last part of the 100 tale, and it is a message from father to son. And after upon hearing this, he needs a minute, and we see Senku in an emotional state for pretty much the first time in the series, and he's crying over the grave of his father. And with this instance almost comes a reassurance of what he's doing. He's taking the kingdom of science to the utmost levels, and he's going to bring back humanity no matter what it takes. So as we head back to the end of the episode and we head back to the party, Gin is there with news. Shishio is headed their way with an army, and Senku seems excited. It's time to show off the power of the kingdom of science. If Shishio wants a war, he will fucking get one. And this is where we conclude episode 17. Like I said, a lot of shit went down. We see that the story is a lot sadder. I honestly didn't expect Connie and Schemmel and Lillian to die off so quick. But like I said, minusing all their possible genetics from the gene pool of the survivors' descendants, it leads me to believe there was a lot of inbreeding. Not only all that though, what the hell happened to Yakov and Daria? Like, they just literally set sail and never came back. Is that going to become part of the story in the future? Did they survive? Did they make it to the mainland? How come they never made it back? There's a lot of possibilities that can come from that one, so that one's fucking huge. And the giant revelation of Senku and Byakuya not be related by blood. Like I said, I have my issues with him and Kohaku. I love that ship so much, but it gave me the heebie-jeebies to maybe think that they were related. But even Senku said that's so diluted after so many generations, but still it's weird. And then Gin, but did not see this coming. Gin has proclaimed that Shishio is ready for a fight. He's headed this way with a fucking army. So holy crap. This episode had a lot in it. Like I said, it was just one of those episodes where it made me feel emotions for characters that were literally introduced last episode. Like, oh, okay, so there's a couple people, and then boom, I'm sitting there tearing up when I'm seeing Connie and Schemmel in the state that they were in. Overall, this episode was great. It answered a few questions, but now I have even more. But I think for now, I'm going to put those aside because seems war is on the horizon. So with that being said, I cannot wait for future episodes.